Hi everyone, I'm Amanda Lewis. I'm 32 years old, a literature teacher from Dallas, Texas. For 5 years, I thought I had everything figured out. A stable marriage with Brian, my accountant husband, and a close relationship with my younger sister Melissa. I believed in family above everything else. I was calm, dedicated, always putting others before myself. But what I'm about to tell you changed me forever. I always trusted too much. Maybe that was my biggest mistake. I suspected something was wrong. But I could never imagine that the betrayal was coming from inside my own family. Let me start from the beginning, because this story will haunt me for the rest of my life. Welcome to Revenge Cat. We reveal gripping stories of broken trust, family secrets, and shocking twists. If you crave powerful narratives, intense emotions, and the sweet taste of justice, this is your place. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing. It was a Tuesday evening in March when I first noticed something was off. Brian came home later than usual, claiming he had extra work at the firm. Nothing unusual, right? Accountants work long hours, especially during tax season. But there was something in his eyes that night. Something distant, cold. He barely kissed me when he walked through the door. Just a quick peck on the cheek, like I was his roommate, not his wife of 5 years. "How was your day, honey?" I asked, trying to sound casual while stirring pasta sauce. "Fine, just tired," he mumbled, already heading upstairs. "I'm gonna take a shower." I stood there in my kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, feeling this strange emptiness in my chest. Brian and I weren't the most passionate couple anymore. 5 years of marriage will do that to you. But we still talked. We still connected. That night it felt like talking to a stranger, but I brushed it off. I always brushed things off. That was my problem. The weeks that followed were filled with small, almost invisible changes. Brian's phone started facing down on the nightstand. He showered immediately after coming home, every single time. He stopped asking about my day, stopped sharing funny stories from his office. And then there was Melissa. My baby sister, 5 years younger than me, had always been the wild one. Where I was careful and methodical, she was spontaneous and reckless. Where I found my calling in teaching literature to high school students, she jumped from job to job, never quite settling down. Despite our differences, we were close. Really close. Sisters' night out every other Friday, long phone calls about everything and nothing, shared secrets that no one else knew. Until that night in April when everything changed. It was one of our regular Friday nights out. Melissa had invited her friend Sarah, and we decided to try this new cocktail bar downtown. The place was buzzing with energy, dim lights casting shadows on exposed brick walls, and the music just loud enough to make you lean in closer when talking. We were 3 drinks in when Melissa got that look in her eyes. You know, the one mischievous, like she was about to spill the biggest secret in the world. "Girls," she said, glancing around dramatically, "I have something to tell you." Sarah leaned forward eagerly. I took another sip of my martini, expecting some story about her latest dating disaster or workplace drama. "I'm seeing someone," Melissa continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Finally, Sarah laughed. "Who is he? Do we know him?" Melissa bit her lip, and for the first time that night, she looked genuinely nervous. "Well, that's the thing. She paused, took a long gulp of her cosmopolitan. "He's married." The words hit me like ice water. Sarah gasped dramatically, but all I could do was stare at my sister. My baby sister, who I had raised more than our parents ever did, who I had protected from every heartbreak and disappointment. "Melissa," I said quietly, "what are you talking about?" I know how it sounds," she said quickly, her hands gesturing frantically. "But Amanda, you don't understand. He's not happy in his marriage. He says his wife doesn't understand him anymore. They've grown apart. Every in the book, every lie that married men tell their mistresses. And my sister was buying every single word. This is insane, Mel, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You're destroying a family. There's a woman somewhere who has no idea her husband is cheating on her. Melissa's eyes flashed with something I'd never seen before. Defiance. Anger. You don't know anything about their relationship, she snapped. You're just jealous because your marriage is boring and predictable. The words stung, but not as much as they should have. Because deep down, I knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Brian and I had fallen into a routine. We were comfortable, maybe too comfortable. But that didn't give her the right to destroy someone else's marriage. Who is he? I asked. Melissa shook her head. I can't tell you. Not yet. He's someone you might know, and I don't want to complicate things. Someone I might know. Those words echoed in my head for the rest of the night. During the uncomfortable ride home, through the sleepless hours I spent staring at my bedroom ceiling while Brian slept soundly beside me. Completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Someone I might know. The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy that felt anything but normal. I went to work, taught my students about tragic heroes and fatal flaws in classic literature, came home to cook dinner for a husband who barely acknowledged my presence. But I was watching now. Really watching. Brian's behavior started to make sense in the most horrible way possible. The late nights, the sudden interest in working out. The new cologne I'd noticed but never commented on. The way he guarded his phone like it contained state secrets. And then there were the timing coincidences I'd never paid attention to before. When Brian said he was working late on Thursday, Melissa had texted our family group chat that she was busy tonight. When he went to that weekend conference last month, Melissa had been mysteriously unavailable for our usual Saturday morning coffee. My hands were shaking as these realizations hit me. I was sitting in my car in the school parking lot, having just finished grading essays about betrayal in Shakespeare's plays. The irony wasn't lost on me. I needed proof. I needed to know for sure before I destroyed my own sanity with suspicions. That night, while Brian was in the shower, I did something I never thought I would do. I checked his phone. His hands were wet from the shower, and he'd left it charging on the kitchen counter. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears as I picked up the device. It was locked, but I knew Brian's password. Our anniversary date. How sickeningly ironic. The messages were there, but not under any name I recognized. Just initials, ML, Melissa Lewis. My sister's initials. My vision blurred as I scrolled through message after message. Weeks of them. Months maybe. Can't wait to see you tonight. Beautiful. My wife is working late again. Perfect timing. You make me feel alive in ways I forgot were possible. And her responses. I miss you already. She has no idea how lucky she is to have you. When are you going to tell her about us? The phone slipped from my trembling hands, clattering onto the kitchen floor. The sound of the shower was still running upstairs. Brian was humming. Actually humming, like he didn't have a care in the world. Like he wasn't destroying his wife's entire universe. I picked up the phone with shaking hands and took screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo, every disgusting declaration of love between my husband and my sister. The worst tration doesn't come from a stranger, but from blood of my blood. I barely slept that night. Brian came to bed smelling like soap and that new cologne, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife now knew the truth about his double life. I lay there in the dark, staring at his sleeping face, wondering how long this had been going on. Wondering how I could have been so blind. But more than that, I was planning. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Something I never did. My principal was concerned. Amanda Lewis didn't take sick days unless she was literally hospitalized. Instead, I drove to Melissa's apartment. She lived in one of those trendy downtown lofts, the kind of place that screamed young professional who makes questionable life choices. I had helped her move in 2 years ago, back when I still believed my sister was a good person. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring up at her building, trying to figure out what I was going to say. How do you confront someone you love about the worst betrayal imaginable? Finally, I walked up to her door and knocked. Melissa answered wearing a silk robe that I didn't recognize. Expensive. The kind of thing she could never afford on her retail salary. Amanda, she looked surprised and maybe a little guilty. What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at school? We need to talk, I said, pushing past her into the apartment. The place smelled different, like expensive cologne, like Brian. Is everything okay? Melissa asked, tightening her robe around her waist. I turned to face her, and for a moment, I saw the little girl I used to braid hair for, the teenager I helped with homework, the young woman I had defended against every criticism from our parents. And then I remembered the messages on Brian's phone. I know, I said simply. Her face went white. Know what? I know about you and Brian. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It stretched between us like a chasm, growing wider with each passing second. Melissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Amanda, how long? I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Inside, I was screaming. It's not what you think, she said quickly. We didn't plan for this to happen. It just it just did. How long? She looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of family dinners where they sat across from each other, pretending to barely know each other, while I played the role of the oblivious wife and sister. Are you in love with him? I asked. This time, she looked up, and I saw something in her eyes that broke what was left of my heart. Hope. Yes, she whispered. I am, and he loves me too. I will never forget what I heard that night. The sound of my sister admitting she was in love with my husband. The sound of my world completely falling apart. He's going to leave you, Melissa continued, gaining confidence. He told me he is. He just needs time to figure out how to do it without hurting you too much. I laughed. Actually laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound that seemed to come from someone else's throat. How considerate of him, I said. And you really believe that? I know you think I'm naive. I think you're delusional, I interrupted. But more than that, I think you're cruel. You're my sister, Melissa, my baby sister. I raised you when Mom and Dad were too busy with their own problems. I protected you from everything. And this is how you repay me. Tears were streaming down her face now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no sisterly urge to comfort her. She had made her choice. I never meant for it to happen this way, she sobbed. But Amanda, you have to understand. Brian and we have something special. Something real. You have lies, I said coldly. You have sneaking around in hotel rooms. And a man who's too cowardly to end his marriage before starting something new. I turned to leave, then stopped at the door. But don't worry, I said without looking back. You're going to get exactly what you deserve. The drive home was a blur. I kept expecting to feel something. Anger, sadness, devastation. Instead, I felt oddly calm, clear-headed for the first time in weeks. I had work to do. Brian was already home when I arrived, sitting on our couch with his laptop, pretending to review client files. He looked up when I walked in, and for just a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt, fear. Hey, he said casually, feeling better. You looked terrible this morning. Much better, I replied, hanging up my coat. Actually, I've been thinking. We should have your family over for dinner this weekend. And mine too. It's been too long since we all got together. Brian's face went slightly pale. Oh, this weekend might not work. I have a big project due Monday and Sunday then, I said firmly. I'll call everyone tonight. I spent the rest of the evening making phone calls, sending texts, planning the perfect family dinner. Brian watched me nervously, probably wondering why his usually quiet, accommodating wife was suddenly so insistent on bringing both families together. If he only knew what I was really planning. The days leading up to Sunday passed in a strange sort of suspended animation. Brian became increasingly anxious, snapping at me over minor things, spending even more time on his phone. Melissa called twice, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk to her again. Not yet. I spent my time gathering evidence, printing screenshots, organizing everything into a neat folder that I kept hidden in my classroom at school. Sunday arrived, gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I had spent all morning cooking Brian's favorite meal, pot roast, with all the fixings. The last meal I would ever cook for him. Both sets of parents arrived at 5, followed shortly by Melissa. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, dark circles under her eyes, hands shaking slightly as she hugged me. Hello. Amanda, we need to talk, she whispered in my ear. Later, I said, pulling away from her embrace. Let's have dinner first. Brian was jumpy throughout the meal, barely eating, checking his phone constantly under the table. Melissa kept glancing between him and me, clearly terrified about what I might say or do. Our parents chatted happily, oblivious to the tension crackling between their children. Dad told his usual stories about work. Mom complained about her book club. Brian's parents asked about our vacation plans for the summer. Normal family conversation. The kind we used to have before everything fell apart. After dessert, I stood up and cleared my throat. I have something to share with everyone, I announced. The table went quiet. Brian's face went completely white. Melissa looked like she was about to be sick. As you all know, Brian and I have been married for 5 wonderful years, I began, my voice steady and calm. And during that time, I've learned so much about trust, commitment, and what it really means to be family. I walked to the kitchen and retrieved the folder I had prepared. I've also learned, I continued, returning to the dining room, that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Amanda, Brian said quietly, what are you doing? I ignored him and opened the folder, pulling out the first set of printed messages. These are text messages from my husband's phone, I announced to the room. Messages between him and his lover. Messages that show a 6-month affair that has been going on right under my nose. Brian's mother gasped. My parents looked confused, unable to process what they were hearing. The affair, I continued, is with someone very close to our family, someone who has been sitting at this very table, eating meals with us, celebrating holidays with us, all while betraying me in the worst possible way. I pulled out another set of messages and placed them in front of Melissa, my sister. The explosion that followed was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. Screaming, crying, accusations flying back and forth across the dinner table. Brian's father actually stood up and left the room. My mother started sobbing into her napkin, but I remained calm. Eerily calm. I have photos too, I said when the initial chaos died down. Hotel receipts. Credit card statements, showing expensive gifts. Everything you need to see to understand exactly what kind of people you raised. Brian finally found his voice. Amanda, please, let me explain. Explain what? I cut him off. Explain how you've been lying to me for 6 months. Explain how you convinced my sister to destroy her own family. Explain how you planned to leave me but were too cowardly to actually do it. Melissa was crying so hard she could barely speak. Amanda, please, I'm so sorry. Sorry you got caught, I said coldly. Not sorry you did it. I turned to address the room. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow," I announced. "Brian, you can collect your things next week when I'm at school. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Since we have evidence of adultery, and since this house was purchased primarily with my inheritance from Grandma Rose, I'll be keeping it." Brian started to protest, but I held up my hand. "As for you, Melissa," I continued, finally looking directly at my sister, "congratulations. You won. You can have him, but you should know, a man who cheats with you will eventually cheat on you." The dinner party ended with both families leaving in shame and confusion. Brian packed a bag and left that night. Melissa tried to stay behind to talk, but I locked the door and didn't answer when she pounded on it, sobbing apologies. But I wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, I systematically informed everyone in our social circle about what had happened. Every mutual friend, every colleague, every person who had ever sat at my dining room table and eaten my food. While my husband and sister carried on their affair right in front of me, I posted a carefully worded message on social media, sharing my story without naming names but providing enough details that everyone knew exactly who I was talking about. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't call them names or make threats. I simply told the truth. Let people draw their own conclusions about the kind of people who could betray family in such a devastating way. The response was overwhelming. Friends reached out with support, sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. Former students sent messages telling me how my strength had inspired them. But more importantly, Melissa's reputation was ruined. She lost friends. She was asked to leave her book club. Even our extended family took sides, and most of them chose mine. Brian tried to contact me several times, claiming he wanted to work things out, that he had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late for apologies. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. As predicted, I kept the house and most of our assets. Brian moved in with Melissa temporarily, but according to mutual friends, that arrangement didn't last long. Turns out, when the excitement of sneaking around is gone, affairs don't translate well into real relationships. Who could have seen that coming? It's been 8 months now since that horrible dinner party. 8 months since I discovered that the two people I trusted most in the world had been betraying me for half a year. The pain of betrayal was immense, but even worse was the disappointment of seeing my own sister involved. In the end, I lost a husband and a sister. But I gained back myself. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. That I don't have to accept being treated badly just to keep the peace. That sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who will hurt you most. But I also learned that I deserve better. That there are people in this world who will value loyalty, honesty, and commitment. That family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up for you when everything falls apart. My real friends showed up. My students showed up. Even some family members I hadn't been close to reached out to offer support. I'm not the same quiet, accommodating woman I used to be. I speak up now. I set boundaries. I don't brush things off anymore. And you know what? I'm happier than I've been in years. Brian and Melissa lasted about 4 months as a couple after my divorce was finalized. Apparently, when you build a relationship on lies and betrayal, it doesn't have a very solid foundation. Last I heard, Brian moved to another state for work. Melissa still lives in Dallas, but we don't speak. Our parents try to encourage reconciliation, but some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Maybe someday, years from now, we'll find a way to rebuild some kind of relationship, but it will never be the same. Trust, once broken, can sometimes heal, but it will always leave scars. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being the sister who refused to be walked all over. I'm okay with being the wife who didn't quietly accept betrayal. I'm okay with being the woman who chose herself, finally, after years of putting everyone else first. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. You teach people how to treat you by what you're willing to accept. I accepted too much for too long, and it nearly destroyed me. But when I finally stood up for myself, when I finally demanded the respect I deserved, everything changed. The worst betrayal taught me the most important lesson of my life. The only person you can truly count on is yourself. But that's not a sad truth. It's a liberating one. Because once you learn to count on yourself, once you learn your own worth, no one can ever take that away from you again. My name is Amanda Lewis. I'm 32 years old, a literature teacher from Dallas, Texas. And this is the story of how I learned to choose myself over everyone else, who had already chosen to betray me. Trust me, it was the best choice I ever made. For more exciting videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share. If you want powerful narratives, strong emotions, and the sweet taste of justice, this is your place.